live informant.
Hotep, and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel Leader, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. I'm here with two of my co-hosts today. First of all, Julian Harper.
Welcome, welcome.
Second of all, Michael Graves, a.k.a. Big Mike.
Namaste.
And unfortunately, Father Lucas will not be with us today. He has a prior engagement and responsibility, and he stated that he will return next Tuesday. So, Father Lucas, your presence will be missed, and we'd like to welcome you once again, our viewing audience, to another edition of what we hope to be a very informative program, and this is where truth and real talk occurs. As is customary, we like to open up the program reflecting on a historic event today that occurred in 1964, approximately this time, which was the interest of the summer. The time setting was the Deep South, and it's the anniversary of the Freedom Summer. You know, there was a lot of civil rights movement around voters' rights for African Americans in states like Mississippi, all throughout the South, where African Americans were prohibited from taking advantage of what was supposed to be the right to vote. We want to look at a small clip of one of the most special people of that era, Fannie Lou Hamer. Gave a very significant and important speech, and we'll comment on that event and other events surrounding that particular time period called Freedom Summer. Let's look at the film, and then we'll be right back.
The testimony before the Credentials Committee, the FDP had a lineup of very different people. They had Rita Schwerner, the widow of Mickey, who had been killed in Neshoba County. They had Martin Luther King. Everybody knew King.
The seating of the delegation from the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party has political and moral significance far beyond the borders of Mississippi are the halls of this convention.
But the highlight of the testimony was that of Fannie Lou Hamer. The sharecropper who had been evicted from her plantation had come to symbolize the Mississippi movement.
Mr. Chairman, and to the Credentials Committee, it was the 31st of August in 1962 that 18 of us traveled 26 miles to the county courthouse in Indianola to try to register to become first-class citizens. We was met in Indianola by policemen.
The president, Lyndon Johnson, he's not afraid of Martin Luther King's testimony. He's afraid of Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony. And so he decides that the country should not see her testify live.
Johnson is in the White House
and he convened an impromptu press conference.
We will return to this scene in Atlantic City, but now we switch to the White House and NBC's Robert Goralski.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States.
On this day, 9 months ago,
He did it knowing that they would break away, thinking he might announce who his choice of vice president was going to be. Instead, he gets up there and he announces, get this, he announces that it's 9 months to the day since Governor Connolly, who was there, was shot along with President Kennedy. So he announced a 9-month anniversary. Everybody's scratching their heads.
thank you very much.
And then he leaves. And by that time, Fannie Lou Hamer's testimony was over. However, it backfired on Johnson because it became a story that she had been taken off television, and in the news that night and for days afterwards, they replayed her testimony.
I was carried to the county jail and put in the booking room. They left some of the people in the booking room and began to place us in cells.
She had Mississippi in her bones. Martin Luther King or the SNCC field secretaries, they couldn't do what Fannie Lou Hamer did. They couldn't be a sharecropper and express what it meant, right? And that's what Fannie Lou Hamer did.
And it wasn't too long before 3 white men came to my cell. One of these men was the State Highway Patrol. He said, "We're going to make you wish you was dead."
Fannie Lou Hamer, as she recants some of the experience she had for merely attempting to register to vote. This is in United States of America, approximately 1964. We're not talking about 100 years ago. Michael, we'll go to you at first. She has some very graphic testimony, and as I stated, she was assaulted in a jail cell, and her only crime, according to the white sheriffs who were placed under arrest, was attempting to register to vote. And we talked about the 4th of July and the Constitution, all of that. What are some of your reflections on this very significant period of time, Freedom Summer 1964?
Well, President Johnson, who had just passed the Civil Rights Act of '64, intentionally co-opted Fannie Lou Hamer's speech because he did not want the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, which he was the representative of, to be acknowledged at the convention. So he intentionally co-opted her speech because he wanted to acknowledge the white representation from Mississippi to keep those Dixiecrats in order. So this is why he did that. Now, the fact of the matter is, the Freedom Summer was a collaboration of COFO, and what it represented was many organizations. Certainly, SNCC was at the head of the thing, which you saw Robert Moses, who was brilliant in bringing all these forces together, as well as SCLC, NAACP, and CORE, organizations like that. But he was the preeminent organizer in this, him and certainly Kwame Ture, Stokely Carmichael then. These were luminaries in that Freedom Summer. It was very bloody. 37 churches were bombed or put on fire during that time, and certainly we know later, and certainly the Goodman, Schwerner, Cheney episode, that it transpired. So it was a real hot summer, and certainly people of all walks of life, including whites, went to Mississippi in buses and carloads to get black people the right to vote. Black people were systematically disenfranchised since slavery time and that little brief period during the Radical Reconstruction where they had the rights. It was systematically taken away when the South got home rule based on this Tilden Hayes agreement, so compromise. So the South had home rule, and certainly Mississippi distinguished itself by not allowing blacks to vote, and that's why you had great people like Meg Evers and all of them. Meg Evers was killed maybe 6 months earlier than that. So it was a very bloody, very, very bloody summer, and a whole bloody and dangerous time overall for our people. So it's great to see Fannie Lou Hamer and so many others that stepped up to the plate and put their life in jeopardy just to enfranchise blacks.
You know, I think it's so important, and I think Noel says something that's very interesting. That wasn't that long ago. You know, when you start talking about 1964, 1962, when you talk about Fannie Lou Hamer, when you talk about her being a sharecropper, you know, my grandfather was a sharecropper, maternal and paternal. So, you know, we need to really recognize that the silence is put on our community to, in a sense, not to talk about these issues, when, as Noel talk about the white media, when we talk about a white educational system, when we talk about a structure that's designed to uplift what happens in white communities and I guess quiet and quell what happens in African American and black communities. You know, we need to pay attention to that. And let me just be clear, because I know my father's watching. My grandfather, or my maternal grandfather, was a sharecropper, and my paternal great-grandfather was a sharecropper. So Dad, I do know our history. So I think it's important that you know, we talk about these things that happen in our community. And as Mike says, when we talk about celebrating it, I mean acknowledging these things that occurred. And again, as Noel so intelligently stated, it wasn't that long ago, and we have to make sure that our children understand that the struggles that we go through today are part and parcel of the struggles that were going on back then. And
again, this did not come out of a vacuum in '64. Certainly there were great work going on by Medgar Evers and others, Field Marshal for the NAACP. And also part of that was also NAACP's Legal Defense Fund played a major role in it also. So, but I'm just saying this was a continuation of work that the black churches had been doing and black organizations for a long time. It gained more national exposure in '64 because not only was there a convention going on, but also white people got involved. And white people kind of like stayed involved in a lot of civil rights movements until obviously when Kwame Ture and others threw in the Black Power part and the Black Liberation part, and that kind of they didn't support that part of the movement, but that was a critical time, a very critical junction in our history. And at that time, you know, which was not long ago, black people systematically could not vote, and that state at that time was controlled by Democrats. So let's not think it's Tea Party Republican kind of thing. It was controlled by Democrats, and Johnson did not want to infuriate them, the Dixiecrats. So this is why he did what he did, because he wanted to recognize only the whites, the white Democrats. So he systematically, in a slick way, did that to Fannie Lou Hamer.
You know, I think it's important, and Mike, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I love the way you present all of the facts. But I think it's important that we also understand that as we're dealing with or discussing these issues, there are issues that we have to deal with politically as far as Voters' Rights Act that's going on today. You know, so I think we have to really pay attention to what's going on politically. We have to pay attention to these political parties that are suppressing the vote of African Americans throughout this entire country. So we really have to look at the political dynamic as well today and compare it, as Mike always say, juxtapose it to what happened back then in the 60s.
And what you say, Julian, is so apropos because, you know, there's no change.
Exactly.
You know, as in '64, the objective and the attempt was to frustrate the black vote, to disenfranchise African Americans politically. In 2013, the same thing is going on all over the country, and we've experienced when Bush ran, and in Florida, how they disenfranchised so many African Americans in that state, which gave him the presidency. You know, it continues today, and it's unbelievable that, you know, that's why it's important to remember this history, because nothing is new under the sun. But issue number two, last week in the nation of Israel, another unfortunate incident occurred when a Palestinian was murdered ghastly, reportedly in retaliation for 3 Jewish teenagers who were found murdered. Now, the response of the nation, of the government of Israel, was to fire bombs indiscriminately in Palestine, allegedly at some targets, although there was never any arrests and then indictments, et cetera, et cetera. So but they felt a privilege to just indiscriminately send missiles. Now, some would ask, now that it's been proven or shown that a Palestinian was murdered by Jewish members of the state of Israel, would it be appropriate for Palestinians to fire bombs, which has unfortunately occurred, into Israel, and are they justified? Julian, we'll start with you. In this region, there's so many unfortunate incidents, time after time, year after year. Is it ever going to stop?
You know, whether, well, I mean, if we look at it in its totality and how long it's been going on and what's happening and the responses from all individuals involved, you would say, no, it's never going to stop. You know, I would hope that that's not the case. I would hope that it would stop at some point. And I will never be able to justify the killing of any innocent people under any circumstances. You know, it's unfortunate that on both sides, I'm sure there are individuals who do not subscribe to the bombing of innocent people. So when we look at that, I think that we have to have a clear and an intelligent thought process when we start talking about whether it's going to be justified to retaliate on either end. You know, it's totally unfortunate, and we're talking about children, we're talking about teenagers who haven't even had the ability to develop their own, at least the way I surmise, their own opinions on what's going on, because I don't think they even have enough information to make an intelligent decision on how they perceive all of these battles that are occurring. So to your question, Noel, I cannot justify a retaliation on either end when we start talking about senseless death, and we're talking about people who may not even have any real, I guess, decision on whether there is going to be a bombing or there isn't going to be a bombing. So I can't justify that.
Well, what we have here is, first, we live in a 24-hour news cycle, and certainly things are covered in real time. Unfortunately, there is a mindset that has preceded real time. So when you see a situation where you find that another Israeli youth was killed, and then again Israeli defensive forces start shooting more missiles and killing people, it always says, and the Western press repeats the same thing, that they killed Hamas. So we have been conditioned. Everybody across the board, especially here in the West, have been conditioned that when you hear, oh, Hamas has been killed, no big deal. They deserve it. As if you're a member of Hamas, you deserve to be killed. Because they have made, when you say Hamas, to mean terrorists. So if you're a member of Hamas, if you're a member of certain organizations that they don't like, you know, they say they mention that organization, so it's not a human being that's being killed. You know, you deserve what you get, and that's unfortunate that they have developed that type of mindset. So when these missiles hit, they don't tell you that they're killing families. They certainly not going to tell you that they're killing women and children. They say Hamas sites were hit, and that's the extent of the coverage. But they'll cover ad nauseum one person or 3 individuals being killed. So it is weighted in a certain way. It is developed and fashioned in a certain way to develop a certain mindset, ergo the results. So this is not balanced. The Israeli Defense Forces, when you see children are being shot down and they're throwing rocks at a tank and they're being shot, even if they're using rubber bullets, but they're using real live fire, but even rubber bullets are dangerous. But they are returning real fire on kids with rocks, and they're not covering it. This is just a crime against humanity, the things you see. And of course, they have a history of shooting white phosphorus into Gaza. So not only do you kill the people there, but you kill future generations. So the coverage at best is slanted.
And Julian, in this particular instance, it just so happened that the cousin of the individual who was murdered in Israel was arrested by police officers, and they had a tape, remind me of what happens in this country, of police officers clearly using excessive force. Now, irrespective of the actions of the individual prior to, as a professional, be it military or be it police, you know, when somebody's restrained, you're supposed to act accordingly. It's over. You take the person, you know, to whatever jurisdiction so he can be accused, tried, et cetera, et cetera. There's a whole lot of, and we see it happen here in the United States as well, explanations of why the police officers overreacted. Here you have a 15-year-old individual surrounded by 3 soldiers, fully armed, et cetera, et cetera. Any comments on that as well?
Well, one thing we have to understand, when you talked about there's always an explanation or some sense of justification, we have to remember who's telling the story.
Right.
And, you know, as Father Lucas, and, you know, we dearly miss him, you know, not being here, he says, you know, who you going to believe, me or your lying eyes? And we can clearly see that there was excessive force in that instance. But what happens is, while we look at a story or listen to a story and watch the tape of what had occurred, there's always going to be someone telling you why something happened, why it's justified. And if we're going to look for anyone to show some real justice in what occurred, we can't look at the people that are involved to show that justice. So, I mean, you know, the bottom line is, as you just stated, Noel, that's the same thing that happens here. Mm-hmm. So we can't expect the story to be told differently and then expect there to be a different response. Right.
And then, Julie, you said, you know, that Father Lucas always says, are you going to believe me or your lying eyes? Recently, there was a story that Facebook had conducted a mood change experiment on its consumers, unbeknownst to them, where they attempted to control the emotional state of their consumers. Mm-hmm. They would flash negative commercials, negative ads, and then follow the particular person's response to their friends, et cetera, et cetera. And they found out, for the most part, that when those individuals that were shown negative ads responded with negative comments, you know, negative information, and those who had positive, you know, responded positively. So they concluded that there was a direct result of their influence to be able to control people's mood. And, you know, when you talk about the power of the press, even though you're viewing an abuse, but they'll have a commentary over the picture that you're actually seeing. Now, some people are induced to believe not what they're seeing, but what the reporter is saying as if it's gospel. And that's the danger. Michael, you know, if you have any comment on, there's been a lot of criticism on Facebook to conduct this kind of experimentation. It's not the first time on its consumers, unbeknownst to them. Do you have any opinion on what they did? And, you know, it happens also in television, period.
Well, I think that certainly there was a time where, you know, you had key personalities in politics that had power. Now you have Fortune 500 companies that rule. Obviously, you know, that's against the law. This was hashed out and determined going way back. And, you know, we have an attorney in the House who didn't join us on the set, but we have Michael Lloyd that's on this, you know, on the side, and he could verify that in the 50s and 60s, even movie theaters used subliminal seduction, and they would just do a real quick flash of a person eating a Frankfurter, popcorn, buttered popcorn, or something like that, and then it would be such a quick flash, and they would go back to whatever they were showing, that now you'd start salivating. You would want you'd want a hamburger or buttered popcorn or a soda, things like that. That was determined to be against the law. I don't know what type of law, you know, and Michael Lloyd would know that better, but it was determined way back then, in the 50s and 60s, so movie theaters had to stop doing that. And so it's not like when you see these experiments, that's only an indication that corporations are back in power.
And Michael's right. I was actually thinking the same thing. You know, this isn't something new under the sun. They've been attempting to control the thought process, the desires, the emotions, the mood of people forever. There's been experiments going on, I mean, as far back as you can imagine. So we shouldn't be surprised about it. I think the technology has changed, so it's being utilized in a different way or conducted in a different manner, but it's nothing new. But that goes back to us learning to control our own destinies. You know, we have to remove ourselves from the control of big business, from media, and every other entity that's attempting to determine or decide how we operate, how we function, what we think about, and how we think about it. So it's really time that we regain the control of our own psyches and thought processes.
And the psychologist Amos Wilson always talked about the conditioning process. So it's important to you know, when Michael mentioned people going to movies and periodically for a millisecond they would flash a picture of popcorn, and they discovered that the sale of popcorn would go up when they did that. It's important for us to realize when we're viewing, whether it be the internet, whether it be television, that to a certain extent there's a lot of conditioning, there's a lot of subliminal messages going on. So sometimes we have opinions, we have feelings that we think we're in control of the source. We think we have an opinion that's genuinely our opinion, but it's been an opinion that's been implanted in our subconscious or our consciousness, and we articulate it and believe it as if it's gospel. So it's important to know that these things are going on. That's the significance of this particular Facebook story, and that's why we brought it up. Every day, you know, whether it be commercials, you know, and our people don't understand the millions and millions of dollars that companies pay for commercials, why they're attempting to subliminally influence you that they have a product that you need. You may not even thought about prior to you seeing the commercial have a desire for that particular item, but the commercial seduces you into wanting it and purchasing it. So there's a whole science behind this, and you know, it's much deeper. Amos Wilson was one of the most articulate professionals that were able to explain this, and a lot of people ought to look him up. Any last comments on this? All right, issue number 3. One of the big issues in the nation, of course, is the story of immigration. In California last week, a group of children who are being sent to this country by their parents in most Latin American countries, including Mexico. And there's a group of children who were attempting to be bussed into a California town, and the people stood up against the buses and somehow, with the presence of police authorities, forced the buses to go back to where they came from. Now, you know, of course, I can only imagine those African Americans, you know, standing in the middle of the road against what a government was attempting to do, how many arrested would have been, but that didn't happen in this particular case. Aside from this, you know, the subject of the hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of children that are coming across the borders illegally, Julian, we'll start with you on this one. What are some of your opinions on this whole immigration story? Barack Obama is attempting to use his presidential authority to go over what the Congress is not doing and taking a position on immigration reform. What are some of your positions on immigration?
Well, you know, I personally think that there has to be a real review of how we utilize our immigration laws. When I say we, this country, let me rephrase it, how this country utilizes its immigration laws. There has to be established a protocol, and whatever that protocol is, in a sense of being developed in a fair and an impartial and a non-biased way, allow the process to take its course. If people have a right, if they come to this country illegally, and then there has to be, and then there's some way that we have to either A, allow them to become legal citizens, or allow them to get a green card, whatever the process may be. Let's follow the process and hold everyone accountable to whatever that process and whatever that those laws may be.
Now, Drew, let me ask you a question, because most people would say that what you said is true. Now, what would you do with the millions and tens of millions of individuals who circumvented that particular process and are here now?
Okay, so then again, like everything else we do, there has to be a process that's developed to deal with those people. Okay, listen, we know that you're here illegally. These are the things that we need for you to obtain to be able to stay in this country. You know, if you don't qualify, whatever it may be, let's say somebody's a mass murderer in their country, and that's not who we want in this country, then we have to find a way to either A, have them sent back to where they come from, or some way to deal with that particular person. But we can't just allow whatever fair rules, and I'm not talking about just any rules, because they have to be fair and non-biased, and they have to be able to work in a system that will allow people who need an opportunity, who want an opportunity, to have it. So let's sit down and think intelligently on what we need to do to allow these people to either A, remain here, or if we have to have them sent back to their country for whatever means or reason we have to do it, then let's do that. But it has to be done intelligently, fairly, and without bias.
Michael, most people, when they look at an issue, other than African Americans for the most part, look at it from how it's going to affect them. Now, I have an opinion on immigration, and most of it, jives just what you said, Julian, and that's what the President Obama is attempting to do now, develop a process, because right now there is no process for the millions that are here. But Michael, when you talk about immigration, most of them are poor, so when they move into a community, it's most likely going to be ours. When it comes for job, application, most of them are going to be for the jobs that African American are in competition for. When you talk about resources and the numerous resources that the government spends, whether it's medical, whether it's dental, whether it's education, most of the resources are resources that could go towards helping the poor that are already here, a large percentage of African Americans. So as it relates to whether or not we support immigrations, are we supporting something that ultimately, really defeats a lot of our objectives as it relates to the areas that I just spoke about and others?
Well, the fact of the matter is that African American struggle is long. It has such a long history, and it's always been a Big Ten. African Americans has always fought for Puerto Rican rights here in New York, Latino rights on the West Coast. It's always been very inclusive. If anything, we have a history of not just fighting for ourselves. We've always fought for others, anybody that's so-called downtrodden. Now, the fact of the matter is a lot of these policies go back to Bill Clinton, who some black people really love. His economic policies ill-affected Mexico to the extent that there is a need for them to cross over here for gainful employment, just to make a few dollars to send back to their families. And certainly this current Congress refuses to pass anything that the current president, or President Obama, is trying to get done. So even if it's sensible, even if it's productive, and that it's inclusive, and that across the board people would be in agreement with it, they're not going to do it because this is what he's trying to do. So he says, on the one hand, President Obama says that you can't have a situation where you see underage children crossing the border and then you use law enforcement, because it's not a law enforcement issue, it's political. And, it should be a clear, concise laws where the law enforcement community can be a part of it, but it's become so political, and they will not pass things, they will not make true definition of things. So you have Arizona going crazy, doing what they do, from the Governor Brewer on down, and the former sheriff, Aparo, whatever his name is, who would just ask people for their papers and just lock people up ad nauseum. So you just have various states operating in different fashions, and President Obama is trying to get a consistent law that would be fair all around, especially fair to children who are underfed, trying to attain education, or who have parents in this country.
And although most of us have issues with parents in foreign countries who would send their children here or allow their children to travel that dangerous terrain with the coyotes, etc., it is an issue. As Michael stated, American foreign policy has been the cause of a lot of the dysfunction that exists in those countries. You talk about Clinton in Mexico. Don't forget Clinton in Haiti.
Well, that economic policy, what's the name of that policy?
NAFTA.
Right. That devastated.
Right. And Clinton devastated the economy, the rights economy in Haiti.
Right.
In which he later apologized, but it's too late. So, and in Honduras, United States supported a coup, was very ruthless. It's a very complicated and very difficult subject to entertain. But we had a portion. Real quick, Mike, I want you to respond to an article. In phone calls, we're going to come to in a second. Michael's going to do this very briefly. UNCF, the United Negro College Fund, accepted $25 million, surprisingly, from the Koch brothers, who gave them a $25 million grant. Now, is there a price with it, with this $25 million gift?
Well, it has some attachments to it. They're claiming that out of the $25 million, $6 million is to UNCF, that they could do whatever they want, but the other $19 million, it has some attachment and strings to it. The president was on, the president of UNCF was on TV One and admitted that they are, And when was asked what are those strings, he would not say. So that's very telling by what he didn't say.
You know, and when we start talking about the finances and money, and Noel, just real quick, when you were talking about monies, when we start talking about immigration laws, when we talk about how it affects our community, when we talk about the mismanagement of funds throughout this country, some of that monies are so minuscule based on, if we look at the monies that the country is giving to
military industrial complex,
Israel, to all over. So the mismanagement of funds can really curtail or change some of that when we start talking about monies when it comes to immigration laws. And when you talk about money, as Mike just discussed and Noel talked about, when we talk about the Koch money, the money that the Koch brothers had given to the NAACP, you know, we don't. When we look at monies that's given to these groups or these corporations, there are never, you know, when you talk about the altruism, when you talk about like the Koch brothers, there's really no altruism when you start talking about that type of money. They're looking for something in return. So we have to be clear when we start talking about monies that the NAACP or any of these organizations receive from people who are so politically involved and what happens in this country. So we really have to look at that as well.
I.e. when Donald Sterling gave some money to the NAACP.
Exactly.
All right, we're at the portion of the program we have to open up our phone lines, and we do ask all of you to call. Sometimes you guys call and it's busy, you hang up and don't call back. Sometimes the phone lines clear up again. So please do call and chime in. First caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Shalom Alaikum, Kareem from Harlem.
Hotel, brother.
Yes, sir, brother. I just want to ask y'all one thing. How many times have y'all seen them stop African Americans from coming over here on slave ships? This country say that they are a nation of people with freedoms and liberty. So how can you stop another person from coming here, but you don't stop Jews from coming here? You don't stop Polish people from coming here, and you don't stop Irish white people like that from coming here. Brother Obama and Brother Holder should do something about the Voters' Rights Act. They have the power, brother. They need to stop jiving and start letting these crackers get away with intimidating black people and people of color all over this country. You brothers keep doing a good job, and God bless you all.
All right, brother. God bless you, too. Thank you for your phone call. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Okay, how y'all doing? How y'all doing, Brother Mike? How y'all doing, Noel? This is Brother Ray Ray.
Hotel.
I'm going to ask a question. Why do they always make a big deal over Schwerner and them going down south when all of those black folks down there were getting killed, but they constantly prop this up about these three individuals like they were the saviors of the civil rights movement, number one. And number two, with the immigration, you know, everybody that comes here and then plays this role, I came here as an immigrant, they come here and then they try to look at the black folks that's been struggling here for the last 600 years like we're invisible. And never want to look at how we have paved the way. They just constantly ignore and don't want to look at a Fannie Lou Hamer and all that stuff that happened. That's what really gets me mad about these new people running around here trying to get here and then playing the immigrant role. We could not say we're a country of immigrants because we didn't come here as immigrants.
All right, thank you for your call, phone call. Anybody wants to comment on this?
Yeah, I'll just say to Brother Ray Ray that certainly this is not accidental. It's not happenstance. When you see Goodman and Goodman and Schwerner certainly being lifted up over all the lives, the countless lives all through the Deep South and the Midwest, and even the Northeast.
Exactly.
All of the lives that have been lost, somehow magically, Schwerner and Goodman has been lifted above them. And I respect their sacrifice because they went back to a church that was bombed, and then after that, certainly law enforcement, the sheriff, took them and with Cheney, and obviously killed them after imprisoning them, letting them out, and then take them off a dark road. And we know that happened, but there are countless lives. I can't lift what Schwerner and Goodman are over the contribution of Medgar Evers and Fannie Lou Hamer, so many people that are countless, that are unnamed, that have been hung, that have been beaten to death. I mean, please. I mean, Turner was beaten. She was beaten in Georgia because she complained about her husband not being paid, and that's the one that Walter White from the NAACP, he did the story because he could pass for white, but he was a black man, and she was beaten and hung upside down, belly cut out, baby dropped to the ground, threw in the fire. I mean, they did everything you could do to her. So I'm just saying, I will not lift Schwerner and Goodman over the countless unnamed black people that were killed. Yes, they made a contribution, but that does not mean all Jewish people is included in the civil rights movements because of those two.
And Michael, as you stated earlier, you know, we always want to pay homage to those who did sacrifice and participate. I never forget when the late Mayor Koch talked about his going down south to assist African Americans. But the reality of the story is there was a lot of hostility in the South against Jews as well. You know? So there was a lot of racial discrimination and hatred for Jews, and sometimes it was reflected in the sign. So it's not as if Jews got a pass. They were in the same boat as us in the South. So it was really their fight as well. So a lot of people say that they helped us. They were also helping themselves.
Right, they were removing barriers for themselves.
Exactly. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yeah, I'm calling from Rockaway. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam, brother.
Yes, sir. Michael Grave, I was at the 8 UAM last week when Brother Malcolm, automatically was supposed to come.
Yes, sir, brother. I saw you there, and thank you for being there. Thank you for being there, brother.
Yes, sir. You're welcome. And I heard you lecture us from start to beginning, from beginning to end. You lectured to us, to the family, to the friends and enemies. And I'm going to say this here, brother. To me, you are smarter than the President of the United States.
Well, thank you, brother.
And those preceded and those before him. I'm not souping you up, but you went back to Reconstruction to the present, and this man, I don't think he got that knowledge. Those before him can do that. Also, concerning the children of Israel, this is over there in Israel. It's sad. It's very sad. But today, I'm praying to the God of our fathers, the Most High, that we will get the guns out of our sons and daughters' hands and fathers these legal guns to do drive-by shooting. It is sad. And then also when in these 52 states where cops can shoot and kill unarmed black and brown men, and we can't get a day in court, and we got politicians on all levels, community activists, and ministers, and we can't get a day in court. I feel sorry for those children in Israel. But I'm thinking about mine here in the United States.
Yes,
Thank you.
As any intelligent person was. Amos Wilson also wrote a book on black-to-black violence, black-on-black violence. Very, very important to understand the genesis and the social conditioning behind, you know, why would a community engage in such self-hating, detrimental behavior. Amos Wilson, excellent book as well. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem. Good evening,
Hotep, brother.
Hotep. This is Brother Rock calling from Harlem. You know, on the subject of immigration, you know, I saw something very disturbing last week on the news. There was a protest of a homeless shelter in Elmhurst, Queens.
Yeah.
And the protesters
a lot of Asians.
were Chinese.
A lot of Asians.
And all their signs were in Asian. Not one sign was in English. Now, if you ask me, if you can't speak the language, first of all, you don't vote, you're not documented United States citizens. Therefore, if you look at the fact that most of our homeless people are people of color, black and Latinos, these people who don't have a voice, don't speak the language, learn just enough English to get by, these people don't have a voice and don't have the right to tell the homeless people where they can lay their heads. I think that's absolutely, utterly ridiculous. And second of all, you guys mentioned the Koch brothers giving a check to United Negro College Fund. Well, they may as well. That's like Donald Sterling giving money to the NAACP. With that, gentlemen, I'll say good evening. Oh, one more thing, gentlemen. I would like you to comment on that California Highway Patrol officer that beat that sister in the middle of the highway like that when she offered no resistance, and the only thing she's probably guilty of was not stopping when she was told. He beat her like an Ultimate Fighter was beating another Ultimate Fighter when they have him down on the ground. I think that's absolutely ridiculous. I understand that officer has been suspended now after being on paid administrative leave, and the California Highway Patrol tried to cover it up and said that the woman was not injured. Good evening, gentlemen. Thank you.
I don't know how a woman can be so aggressively and repeatedly punched about the head and face from a man and not receiving the injuries? Any commentary on that?
I would just say that certainly I saw what those police officers did, and it goes without saying it was a cowardly act. The abuse was apparent, and the fact of the matter is when you're in a situation where you can do this without knowing that there will be repercussions, then the real you comes out, and the real person we saw them in full effect. They knew that national black organizations, for the most part, national black leaders, are all under control now. It's very unfortunate that they knew that they can get away with it, and that's why they did it. I mean, for jaywalking, come on. I mean, she wasn't even, not only not the commission of a crime, she wasn't even doing anything where at least you have to approach her to say something to her. She was so-called jaywalking, walking in the middle of the street, from one side to the other side. That's not even worthy of being approached, but they approached her and went into full effect, slammed her down, beat her down, and then they said they was trying to help her. Please, that's ridiculous.
And you know, our phone lines are open, but Julian, we talked about an assault that was also captured on film in Israel. But going back to this particular sister who was assaulted by this police officer, if there was some concern, and it's the epitome of hypocrisy, if there was some concern for her well-being because you know, she was walking in the traffic, you know, why would he respond so aggressively with physical force? You know, if she was a emotionally disturbed person, which he might have thought she was.
She was a professor.
You know, we talk about the woman on the highway. Because there was a woman on the highway.
The street. She was
the professor.
She was a professor.
Well, that was the one where he asked for ID.
Right.
You know, there was another one where a woman was walking on the highway.
That's what this
that's what he was talking about, and she was assaulted. But both of them, you know, were similarly, you know, problematic. Now, going back to the sister, you know, for him to respond to somebody in such an aggressive manner, and you know, he couldn't have been in fear of any physical, you know, assault from a woman that he had down on the ground. I think it was preposterous. You know, had an African American chief of police who said, you know, he had some kind of drawback comments. If I was chief of police, I'd have been stating that we're looking to terminate. But what were some of your thoughts when you looked at the film?
Well, you know, unfortunately, you know,
and Cole, we'll be with you in a minute.
You know, unfortunately, you know, these police departments are in the business of protecting their police departments. So I'm not surprised by the response from the chief. You know, the woman, you know, she didn't seem threatening in any way, shape, or form. She was walking in the highway, and if he was concerned that she may have been emotionally disturbed, that is not how you respond to someone who's emotionally disturbed when they're not showing any signs of threat towards you. And when she was on the ground and she was attempting to cover herself and protect herself, he continued to beat her. You know, we have to stop giving anyone who's violating the rights, the laws of this country and of their state passes, whether they're police officers or not. You know, I think that we have to really start looking at how we respond to the over-aggressiveness and the blatant brutality of law enforcement and deal with it accordingly. And I think because they receive passes, they continue to, and we got to remember, this only happens in our community, or for the most part. I'm not going to say only, but for the most part it happens in black and brown communities, or black and brown people are victims of these over-aggressive attacks, and they have to be addressed.
All right, the next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Yeah, I'm calling from Harlem, Hotep.
Hotep, brother.
But I just want to touch on something real fast that Julian just spoke of. It seems to happen in our community because of the simple fact the powers that be within the police department, the minorities, are the ones that are actually, in some cases, condoning and endorsing the nonsense. For instance, in Harlem here, we had an officer by the name of Leonardo D. Oliveira, doused people from a precinct house window, disrespectfully, with some form of liquid. And the inspector, Rodney Harrison of the 3-2 precinct, thought to actually help cover it up by compelling the officer to confess. So this way, there could be no extreme charges held against him. So it seems like you can't blame it on white society any longer because the faces are black. Now, here's a question I have for you, gentlemen. What is your connection to Graham Witherspoon, if there's any at all, if you can explain?
All right, go ahead, brother.
He seems to be a former law enforcement officer himself, and he speaks of wanting some of you guys to come on their show.
Well, okay. I did Graham's show.
Thank you for your call, brother.
I did Graham's show recently. Graham is our brother. I love Graham. Have known him for years. Extremely intelligent brother, extremely sharp, not only with law enforcement in terms of our history and the struggle. Graham is on the money, so love the brother.
And I think if you look at some of the recordings on YouTube, you know, his work in the community speaks for itself, you know, and that's when he was an active police officer, and that's when he was a retired officer as well. You know, he's been very consistent over the years and speaking on the behalf of our people, you know, appropriately speaking. Next caller, welcome to Community Cop. I think that thing went back to zero. I want to talk about the phone lines open, caller, so somebody call in. It just went back to zero. Julian or Michael, the gentleman spoke about a protest that happened in Queens, where a bunch of individuals, protesters, were voting, were speaking against a homeless shelter in their community. And I have no problem with a homeowner not wanting a homeless shelter in their community. If that's the way they feel, understand that. But there was a lot of disparaging, disrespectful remarks made to the occupants of the shelter, you know, disrespectful, and it was kind of preposterous for me to see a community which is largely immigrant, you know, who supports for the most part this particular community, the immigration of their ancestors coming to this, and their family members and their people coming to this country, but would act so disrespectful to some people who are out of luck. And there was one woman who spoke at this meeting who was, you know, summarily booed, who said, listen, man, I'm just one paycheck away from being homeless myself. You know, so we have to have a little compassion. Those who are against the homeless shelter in their community, fine. And this was a family homeless shelter, not a men's homeless shelter, which, you know, there may be some tactical differences, but they was, you know, just badgering and so disrespectful. You know,
well, you could
as a community of immigrants that we spoke before, they were seeing this issue from only their eyes, you know, which sometimes we need to do a little more often. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm just wondering, would that have been the same response had those people been white? I don't think that Asians would so summarily reject them. I think Asians put a value on white skin, and they even during the Exclusionary Act, and certainly it's in the annals of civil rights history, they tried to make a petition when there were Jim Crow laws in effect. They tried to pass themselves off as white to get around those laws. So Asians have a whole history of things that can easily be construed as anti-black, and certainly they tried to, when it suits them, they will weigh in on the white side.
All right, next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
I'm calling from Harlem.
Hotep.
Hotep Brothers. I'm just calling in reference to the sister who was brutally beaten by the California Highway Patrol.
Right.
But there was also the incident of a professor, an
Right.
That's what I was talking
female
about.
professor from the University of Arizona.
Right.
And so there seems to be a pattern whereby African American women, makes no difference whether you're a professional person, whether you're just an average person, where there's no hesitation to just slam you on the ground and treat you like you are a beast with absolutely no humanity. But also in terms of the immigration, brothers, I thoroughly understand where you're coming from, in that our policy has created the economic destruction in Latin American countries. But you know, you have a lot of children in Haiti who were left orphans because of that earthquake 5 years ago. And there is a bill right now where these children can be reunited with family members right here in the U.S., specifically in Brooklyn and in Miami. And those children can't get here. So I really am sick and tired now. I want to be sympathetic to all those children coming across the border, but I can't be, because you got Haitian children with families who want them here, will not cost us not 1 cent, and they can't get here.
Right. And sister, you still there?
Yes.
That's why I said before I spoke about the immigration, situation, I said we need to view every issue from our eyes and how it's going to affect and impact us. Sometimes we look on it from a moral stance, which should be done as well. But everybody else, how's it going to affect me? Moral or immoral? How's it going to affect me first, second, and third? And unfortunately, our community, I think we need to do more of that. Thank you for your call, sister.
Thank you.
And one of the things we have to look at when we start looking at any of these issues, we got to look at the duplicity how it's being dealt with, how they deal with it when they're dealing with our people, African people, and how they deal it when they deal with non-African people. And there's always, at least in my eyes and when I view it, there's always some duplicity when we look at these things. And as Noel stated, we do have a moral sense. We go, oh, you know what, let's be fair about it. But we have to look at the unfairness as well. I'm not saying take away your ability to be fair and impartial when you look at things, but you also have to look at the unfairness and the partiality when they deal with our people.
All right, next caller. Welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from?
Uptown.
Hotel, brother.
How we doing, brother? I meant to ask you guys to touch on something real fast.
Where you calling from, brother? Where you calling from?
From Harlem.
Okay.
Did you guys actually hear about the young man in Brooklyn that was actually in a illegally parked vehicle and was actually hit by the police going down the wrong street, or wrong way on the street, and they actually arrested him for intentionally running into them, and now the video footage shows that the officers actually struck him? I want to see if you guys can touch on that real fast. All right, thank you.
Right. I think you know.
He just touched on it.
Yeah, right. I mean, these officers were, you know, of course they didn't know they were filmed. They were being filmed and that it would ever come to light. I'm pretty sure that they perjured themselves, not lied, under oath, and should be arrested if they did. But, you know, police officers, the abuse of power that we unfortunately see too many times in our community. But next caller, welcome to Community Cop. Where you calling from? Next caller, are you there? All right. I see. Quote, wrap it up.
Okay. You know, when we start
wrap it up, Hawk.
You know, we talk about these issues that are affecting our community. We talk about the abuses, the sister that was beat by the highway patrol. You know, this is not. You know, we get to see one or two that are captured on video, but if you start looking at the ones, or if we had an opportunity to look at the ones that weren't captured on video, this happens more often than we would like it to happen. And until we start holding the ones that are videoed and the ones that are not videoed, we start holding these people who are involved accountable, these things are going to continually happen. We have to hold from the cop that's involved to the administration that covers it up and allows it to happen. So we have to hold everyone accountable. Dad, I know you're watching. I love you. Reinstate automatics, and we really have to get involved collectively as a community.
Dick Gregory tomorrow, 1061 Atlantic Avenue in Brooklyn at 7 p.m. Dick Gregory tomorrow, 1061 Atlantic Avenue between Franklin and Clausen. In the salient and immortal words of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, accept your own and be yourself, reinstate automatics.
All right, on behalf of Community Cop, those of us before the cameras, we'd like to thank our engineers and our staff, Veronica Kitt, Nat Wood, Sheila Berry, Brother Nolan for, you know, doing all the mechanical, and Richie Rich from Manhattan Neighborhood Network for doing everything that they do on the electronic side and the camera side to put the show together. Knowledge is power. Little Mo, I love you. And we thank you for calling. Thank you for watching. See you next Tuesday. And, you know, we appreciate the opportunity to talk about issues from our point of view, because you're not going to see that in none of the stations, very few of the newspapers, very few of the radio stations. So this is our opportunity to speak about issues from our perspective. We appreciate you tuning in and you calling. See you next Tuesday, 5 o'clock. Little Mo, once again, love you, Little Mo. Peace. See you next Tuesday.
And while we still have the chance, let's face the music and dance.